There's also a tremendous passion in his films. They're always being blamed as being cold, but they're not cold. They are perfect. And the perfection sort of encloses this deeply felt emotion, even if it's emotions of dread, like in The Shining, or of loss, as in The Killing, or Eyes Wide Shut and Full Metal Jacket. They reach out in ways that other films don't. And in that reaching out, they take you by your mind and by your heart in ways that ordinary films don't do.
Well, joining me now on Open Book, a real treat for me, is Nathan Abrams and Robert Kolker. Both of these gentlemen are professors. Nathan Abrams, a professor in film at Bangor University, and Professor Robert Kolker, a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland. I think it's the Terrapins, right? Go Terrapins, right? And so, but the book is called Kubrick, An Odyssey. And this is one of the reasons why I tell all my viewers and listeners, you got to go to bookstores because you got to see what's in the shelves. And there I saw the Kubrick and Odyssey. I said, "Oh wow, okay, I got to buy this." My son and I are big fans of Stanley Kubrick, and the book is literally incredible. It's a great rendition of a lot of things that happened in the film industry over the last 50 years. But in addition to that, you guys are great writers, so I enjoyed it a lot. Why don't we start with you, Bob? It's great to have you on. Nathan as well. What a book. Why? Why did you guys decide to write the book? Tell us a little bit about your friendship or business relationship.
Relationship with Nathan goes back a few years. We had already collaborated on a making of Eyes Wide Shut that was published, 5 years ago? Something like that.
Hey everyone, it's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show.
And we were in constant contact. We were both fanatic Kubrick fans, and more than fans, deeply involved in trying to figure out what Kubrick is about and what his work is about. I had been interested in starting a biography in the early 90s, but there was no way to get into the archives, not to mention to speak to Kubrick himself. He was busy and he was keeping everything close to the vest. By the time Nathan and I really got going and thinking about the biography, the archives had opened to the public at the London School of the Arts. And Nathan had gone through them practically beginning to end. We also spoke to Jan Harlan, who was Kubrick's brother-in-law, is Kubrick's brother-in-law, and was his producer on all the films since The Shining. And he was very helpful to us. And the things just began coming together. You know, this long quest on my part of 10, 20 years of wanting to do this. And Nathan's great facility at research and putting things together. The book emerged, and it emerged fairly quickly in about 2 years. We were lucky to get Faber and Faber as publishers in England, and luckier still to get Pegasus to publish in the US. So there are 2 versions of the same book available depending upon where you are.
So Nathan, you did obviously you both did, but you did a tremendous amount of research on this. But there was new information that you had access to that you referenced. So tell us about the new information that enabled you to put this full life narrative together of Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, just one correction. Not to think that we've just been working on this for 2 years. Bob and I have been studying and teaching Kubrick for decades combined. The new information, well, there's this archive at the University of Arts London that Bob mentioned that's just jam-packed with boxes. Kubrick kept like everything, pretty much. And that isn't just the stuff related to the filmmaking and the films he made and the films he didn't make. There's all the sort of trivia, the miscellany of everyday life, bills for alarms, receipts, that kind of thing. And this stretches back to the 40s, mid 40s. So, I mean, some examples, he was a camp photographer for a Jewish summer camp in 1944, and he kept the newspaper in which he was the photographer. And it's just little things like that gave us a window into his world and a bit more understanding of the person. And it's interesting that he decided that was worth keeping, either because he was a hoarder or because he valued that particular item. But as we went through, there's all kinds of stuff that we came across.
Well, as a fellow hoarder, I have appreciation and fondness for hoarding. So, but I mean, a son of a, he grows up in the Bronx. He has a comfortable Jewish upbringing. His father's a local doctor. He's close to his mom. He buys a camera at a young age. He's absolutely fascinated with the art of filmmaking, but he struggles in school. So he doesn't fit the mold. But one of the things that Kubrick says, you guys reference it in the book, if you want to learn how to make a film, is make a film. So he goes right into filmmaking, right? It's pretty amazing, right?
He was a terrible student. And his parents even sent him off to California for a year with relatives to see if a change in scenery would help. It didn't. And he just made it out of high school. And most of the time he spent watching films and taking pictures in this early stage of his life. And even at a young age, kept repeating that he could make better films than what he saw at the local theater or at MoMA.
But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was an autodidact, basically. He was doing this on his own. It was, he was almost like he had a block of granite and he was chiseling into the granite his artistic creation, it being his filmmaking. And because of this, I think he has his own personal fingerprint of filmmaking. You guys teach film. I'm more of an observer of film, but I don't think there's anything like a Kubrick film. So let's say I landed from Mars. I'd like you each to answer this if you don't mind. I come off the spacecraft and I say, okay, why is Stanley Kubrick so different than these other directors? Why are his films so unique? And you could watch them 5 or 6 times and still see things in them that you may have missed the first time.
Can I go on that one? Just to add to what you said before, Anthony, is that there was a lot of chutzpah involved in Kubrick's filmmaking, and just, what, he was watching these films the whole time, and then he was saying, I can make a film as good or as bad as this, so I might as well give it a go, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, I've got 2 points that I think make Kubrick's films stand out and survive. One is most of them, at least the mature ones, have some kind of technical innovation where he pushes a technology, either invents it, like shooting in natural light using that NASA lens for Barry Lyndon is one example. He might not have invented the Steadicam on The Shining, but the way he used it really developed how one might use a Steadicam on a film set. So each of his films has some kind of innovation. But the other thing is Kubrick did this legendarily pre-production research. He really immersed himself into a topic and became an expert, whether it was nuclear warfare or Napoleon and the other topics. And because of that, his films contain ideas. And the amount of text he read around. So when he made The Shining, he was reading Freud and Bruno Bettelheim, as well as Gothic literature, as well as Stephen King. And while there might not be direct references to those authors, apart from King, obviously, in the movies, the ideas stay. And I think as you watch them and rewatch them over the years, and as your life changes, and as we teach them to new generations of students, different ideas from our backgrounds emerge. And I think that's what distinguishes, those 2 things are what distinguish a Kubrick film.
There's also a tremendous passion in his films. They're always being blamed as being cold, but they're not cold. They're perfect. And the perfection sort of encloses this deeply felt emotion, even if it's emotions of dread, like in The Shining, or of loss, as in The Killing, or Eyes Wide Shut and Full Metal Jacket. Still, they reach out in ways that other films don't. And in that reaching out, they take you by your mind and by your heart in ways that ordinary films don't do.
I, I mean, I was always fascinated by his work. If you had to identify one film, you say, okay, this is the number, not in the order chronologically, but the one film you say, okay, this is quintessentially Kubrick. This has everything in it. What would that be, Robert?
For me, it would be Barry Lyndon.
Barry Lyndon. Yep. Nathan.
Dr. Strangelove.
Interesting. Okay, so I mean, and again, for my viewers and listeners, Barry Lyndon is a contemporary. It's a piece that it's a, how do you say it in your world? But it takes place, I guess, in the mid 18th century, right? Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dr. Strangelove is a parody a bit, right? I mean, it's about the nuclear holocaust, the potential annihilation. Peter Sellers is a star in that movie, and he's capturing what exactly? Let me ask you, Robert. What is he capturing in Barry Lyndon that you'd want your students or film buffs to understand?
How you make a costume drama that is really about the moment, and how you go about seeing the past cinematically, and using all the technological possibilities to make that past immediate. Most famously in Barry Lyndon, lighting interiors by candlelight without any artificial intervention, any artificial light intervention. Using the zoom lens, which is a very modern invention, but using it in a way to comment upon the characters and their environment. And also deeply feeling it's his most sentimental film. And it's a sentiment about loss and about the past and about not belonging, and imminent disappearing. Barry just disappears from the film. The narrator says, "We have nothing more to say about him."
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And Dr. Strangelove?
Well, Doctor Strangelove really spoke to the period in which it was made. It's the early 60s. The New Left is revising the sort of orthodox views of the Cold War, and the counterculture is rising. And you've got novels like Catch-22, and Kubrick makes a film that speaks to the times. Not only is potential nuclear holocaust on people's minds after the Cuban Missile Crisis, he decides he can't make a serious film. He says the only way to treat a topic so serious is by treating it as a black comedy. And it's one of those films where, you start to watch it, and even though you know all the lines that are coming, you just can't help but be absorbed in the zingers that keep coming at you. And you think of Peter Sellers' improvisations on the telephone. You actually forget that he's not talking to someone. It's there's the look on Mark Desadsky's face when Peter Sellers as Dr. Strangelove is choking himself like a naughty schoolboy trying not to laugh. And then, like I said, behind the film, there's he recreated a B-52 bomber's interior so accurately, especially the CRM-114, that the US Air Force was scared that secrets had leaked. And there's so much detail in there, so many ideas, the amount of reading he did around it that you can see in the film. So it brings together everything that I said in my last response about technical innovation and ideas, but with a fantastic sense of humor.
Well, I'm gonna add one for you guys, which I'm sure is also another one of your favorites, is 2001: Space Odyssey, because you watch the movie, he's predicting the future.
Mhm,
It's the story of our lives unfolding for us. The
mhm.
last 55 years, since the film came out, or 56 years, and of course the very famous artificially intelligent computer, which is named HAL, which is a little bit of a joke there, right? Because it was IBM, but he took the I and he moved it to the H, and he took the B and moved it to the A, and he had all of these little things that he was doing from an artistic point of view to get film buffs like the two of you and a amateur film buff like me excited to see what he was doing in the film and how to unpack it from his brain. But talk for a moment, both of you, if you don't mind, about 2001: Space Odyssey, because man, did he get so many things right about where we are today, even, and what we fear today.
Yeah, I think 2001 is sort of outside of competition, which is why I don't name it as my favorite. It is the great um, Kubrick film.
Is it his opus? Would you say that, Robert? That this
I would say that none of the other films have as intense imagination and innovation and prophecy as 2001. Nathan may disagree, um, but it's a film that keeps speaking to us. Uh, Strangelove does the same thing. I mean, it does it in terms of history. It doesn't get old. It's always the same world with different characters playing the same deadly games. 2001 is the result of just intense work of many, many people. I mean, one of the things that we try to point out is that Kubrick was the master of a huge army of doers and thinkers, of scientists and um, sculptors and sketch artists and model makers. And we can't forget Arthur C. Clarke, the great science fiction writer, who was a tremendous influence. Um, in fact, was the catalyst for the film. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, for me, I mean, adding to everything that Bob said, and then all the technical innovation in the movie, um, front projection, and the fact that he filmed the dawn of man in Namibia, and then but he shot the apes in a studio, and you wouldn't know, like even when you got on a big screen, you can't see the join. And this is in the mid 60s. But what I really like is you can see Kubrick's sense of humor in the film. So the monolith appears, looks like the two tablets of stone, or at least one of them, but with no writing on them, like the Ten Commandments with no commandments. But where do we see the Ten Commandments? On the toilet door of the zero gravity bathroom. And there's just so many moments like he invents this supercomputer, but he gives him a really banal name, Hal. You imagine these days they wouldn't call any computer Hal. It would have some amazing supercomputer 3000, and when they're on the moon ship and they just want a sandwich, and they keep saying ham, ham, ham. It's like these banal moments, but also very funny moments in a movie that, unlike Doctor Strangelove, wasn't directly speaking to its times explicitly in the way that Doctor Strangelove was, but yet so clearly was speaking to what was happening in the United States and abroad in 1968 and during the Vietnam War, and where are we going as a species, and is violence what motivates evolution as one of the key questions in the film. And I think the beauty of that film is we still debate what it means now, as well as admire its craft.
There's a wonderful disconnect in the film between the absolute banality of the human figures and the absolute wonder of their surroundings, both in the universe and in the equipment that they use, and Hal himself, who refers to himself as a conscious entity and who has the knowledge of what they're about to do before they do. Um, so it's this sort of play of human passivity against technological progress.
Yeah, listen, I mean, to me, I love the fact that you guys have put this book out there because uh, we don't make films like this anymore. We don't craft them this way. I'm sure someone will come along that does this. Scorsese has a certain style. De Palma has a certain style. But when you look at them, even Spike Lee, they all went to film school, and so they've got certain things that they're doing. I don't want to say it's box checking because they're all brilliant directors, but it's different from Kubrick. Kubrick is coming at the filmmaking. It's almost as if the lack of influence from teaching. It's almost as if his lack of being a good student, professors, aided and abetted his filmmaking. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? That's when I read your book, that's what comes across to me, that he couldn't probably sit in your class, so he had to do it himself, and it created all of this great innovation. What did I miss?
They're homemade films.
Homemade films, exactly right.
The other thing is he didn't like theory. I mean, he read maybe one book of film theory in his life, the book on editing by Podovkin, and that was about it. He didn't, and he mocked the French theorists and people like us who come along and read meanings into his films. He didn't care for that. So in a way, he wasn't scarred or ruined by academic film studies that made everything into a sort of, like you say, Anthony, a tick box exercise. And and the other thing about him is a lot of it was trial and error. He didn't think it all through beforehand in the way that Hitchcock did. So he made mistakes, and he learned, and sometimes didn't learn from those mistakes. Whereas the later directors can learn from the mistakes of others, whereas Kubrick had to make them along the way and learn the hard way. Where I think the way other directors didn't.
So I'm a film buff. I've not really, I've only been in one movie in my life. I was in Wall Street 2. Oliver Stone let me play myself. This is 2009 in Wall Street 2. And I got fairly close to Oliver. I still see him for dinner and so forth. And at one of the dinners, he said that the director that had the best visual wit was Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah,
okay. And I want you to describe what visual wit is, if you don't mind. And then if you can, give us some examples of what it means to have visual wit and examples in his work. And by the way, do you agree with that? By the way, do you agree with Oliver Stone's
absolutely.
statement?
Yeah. Yes. I would take an example from The Shining, where the sequence in which Jack is staring at the model of the labyrinth, and you zoom down and you see the little figures moving around. And then he plays handball against the floor of the hotel. And on the soundtrack is a very particular piece of classical music, Bela Bartok's strings, I've forgotten, concerto for strings, percussion, and celeste. And at exactly the point where there is a percussive sound on the music, Jack hurls his ball down on the floor of the hotel. So there's this double bang, the bang of the music and the bang of the ball on the floor. And it's just a wonderful idea, a witty idea. And his films are full of those.
Anything you want?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add, Nathan?
Yeah.
Say again?
Yeah.
No, I was just asking Nathan if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I'll give you one tiny example. A sort of blink and you miss it moment in Eyes Wide Shut. So Tom Cruise as Bill is meeting the sex worker Domino, and as the camera tracks them around the corner, they stand in front of a bakery, and it's called Joseph Kreiber's Bakery, and it's an exact replica of Jonas Schimmel's on the Lower East Side. which for some reason we don't know why he put in there. And this is right bang in the middle of Greenwich Village, so it's anachronistic. But that aside, it's a Kanishari. And we're like, well, why has Kubrick stuck this Kanishari in there? You know, and obviously I wrote a book called Stanley Kubrick, New York Jewish Intellectual, where I really wanted to put him in that milieu. So I waxed lyrical about the reasons for that. But for me, where the visual wit here is that what I learned doing that book was that Kanish is a euphemism. You know, a sex worker might say, you're looking for some Kanish. And, you know, that one little moment, if you have the knowledge, you get the joke. And if not, it's just a nice part of the scenery and you can move on. But it must have been important to him because he had that set built and recreated, either from photographs, from some childhood memory, because his grandparents lived down the street. But yeah, it adds layers.
To me, it's the most fascinating part of them. You know, I don't know if you guys remember when the Beatles put all those little riddles in their albums. You know, there's an artistic expression that Kubrick has. You almost have to be a Kubrick detective to catch that. You know, now I've got to go back and watch that movie and catch that. I missed it, obviously. And even the numbers of the rooms that you're entering into in The Shining all have different meanings, as an example. What would he have worked on? He had an untimely death, unfortunately. If I remember correctly, he died in right around this time of the year, 1999. It was right after Eyes Wide Shut came out, I believe. What would he have done next had he not had such a sudden end to his life?
Well, he had 2 films that he was working on in the 90s. One of them, Wartime Lies, from the novel Wartime Lies, which he called Aryan Papers, his Holocaust film, was very, very close to production, extremely close to production. The locations were scouted, the players were chosen. Everything happened except for 2 things. One of them was the appearance of Schindler's List, and Kubrick and Warner Brothers were afraid that the 2 would not be able to do well together.
Mm-hmm.
The other was Kubrick himself feeling depressed over what he had learned and the amount of research, the amount of reading that he had done about the period simply got to him.
Mm-hmm.
So the film never got made. Mm-hmm. The other film that was not as close to production was AI, Artificial Intelligence. Mm-hmm. And that was because he couldn't find the perfect CGI computer graphics. He couldn't find the perfect boy who could stay as a sort of mixture of human and robot. And he couldn't get a good script.
I'm going to interrupt you there. The problem with it wasn't the actor. The problem was Kubrick knew he took so long to make a film that if he was going to film a boy, right, he said by the time I finish shooting, he'll have a beard already. And one of the things we discovered from the archive is when he shot Danny in The Shining, he had 2 pairs of shoes or 2 pairs of outfits for when he grew, because he was aware of how long he took. But he knew Steven, so they were friends by that point, Steven Spielberg. He said, look, Steven can shoot a movie in 6 months. It won't be an issue. And he didn't want to use CGI because it wasn't good enough to recreate a human. But he knew if he used a human, he would obviously age during the film.
Interesting
which is why he never made it.
Anybody out there right now? I'll ask both of you this question. Anybody out there right now? I mean, obviously, there's no one quite like him. I think he has his own unique fingerprint. But is there anybody out there right now that you would look to and say, "Wow, that man or woman has a unique perspective or a unique eye in filmmaking"?
I think there are pretenders to the throne, but I'm not sure that they count.
Okay. What about you, Nathan? Anybody?
I have 2, and one which is going up in my ranking. Darren Aronofsky, and who has a very unique vision across his movies. But the one I'm really plumping for is Jonathan Glazer, who early in his career kind of steals. Mm-hmm. I mean, he says, I picked his pocket. I didn't so much pick his pocket as take his wallet, was the way that Glazer puts it. But if you watch The Zone of Interest, The Zone of Interest, I think if Kubrick had the opportunity to make it, that would have been the film about the Holocaust he would have wanted to make, because you don't
It's
need to show
interesting.
anything.
It's an incredibly powerful movie.
Yeah.
You mentioned Aronofsky. I spent the week scouting conference sites for our new conference for my business Skybridge, and I was at the Sphere, and I watched the Aronofsky film related to the environment on that 16K. I mean, I thought IMAX theater had something until you go to the Sphere and you see this movie. It's very, very powerful, very beautiful movie, but also a sad movie. Before I get to the last piece of this podcast, I want to ask you about that. The struggles for an artist, because I have the theory, I want to test it on you. The artist has a tendency to be very empathic, and so they can see the good and the bad of human beings. And sometimes it makes them depressed. Van Gogh, Picasso, I could list them. Kubrick had a little bit of that, yes?
He had a certain amount of OCD, maybe more than a certain amount.
Okay.
Was he depressive? I don't think so.
Okay.
Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I think he was drawn towards war. He loved military history. Military history turned, one of the reasons he wanted to make Napoleon. Military history turned into German history of the 20th century. German history of the 20th century inevitably led into the Holocaust. And in part, that was the reason why he didn't finish making that picture. He got too depressed. He saw the worst side of humanity, and he would have done extensive research.
I'm talking more about situational depression with him, not depression, clinical depression. But I guess my point is that if you're that good as an artist, you can see things probably more clearly, or you're more empathic than some of us, myself included, I might add. You agree with that?
He was an ironist. He always saw the world from multiple points of view. He saw the serious and he saw the absurd, and he saw how the two always bounced off of one another. I think that may have kept him from depression. That and also his deep involvement in reading, as Nathan says, he read and read and read.
So my son, he's 24. He's a aspiring film director. This is his favorite film director by far. He studied him very carefully. He's read your book at my suggestion, and he reminds me that Dr. Kubrick was the first financier of Stanley Kubrick. Isn't that correct? I guess he helped him make his first movie, and he got the money.
The family did. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so he's like, Dad, you got to pony up here. Okay, see, so you guys put that in your book. It hurt me. The two of you guys hurt me by accident. See that? But, I'm kidding. It's
when he makes a blockbuster, when he makes a blockbuster that you finance, you can thank us.
Exactly. I'll look back on the two of you and say, see that? You helped the kid get his film career started. But he said, Dad, in the book, just so you know, the father, the parent, the family helped him get the film career started. All right, so I end these podcasts with 5 words. My producer and I come up with these words, and then I ask our authors. You can give me a sentence, a word, something comes to mind when I say the word. And obviously, these questions or these 5 words are for both of you. Let's start with you, Nathan. I'm going to say the word photography, and you say what?
Kubrick learned his craft through being a photographer. Shaped everything.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Aspiring photographer, converting into film. What about you, Robert? I say photographer. You say what?
The perfect image.
Yeah. And he was a perfectionist for sure. I say the word film.
A way to tell a story so that the images and the sound convert the meaning, express the meaning.
Nathan?
Nothing was sealed down for Kubrick until he saw it. on the monitor, on film. Didn't matter what his ideas were. He had to see that it looked right on film.
Interesting. When I hear Kubrick in film, I think canvas. I feel like he's painting. He's almost painting on it. It's like a weird thing with this man in terms of his artistic capability. All right, I'm going to say the word, Nathan. I'm going to say the word Odyssey. You're going to say what?
It's Kubrick's life journey. He begins in New York and he ends in New York. Although he dies in London, he ends in New York with Eyes Wide Shut, which is his birth town recreated in the home that he adopted.
Mm-hmm. Robert, you want to add anything?
The name of our book.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. All right, I'm going to say the words moon landing. What do you say to that, Robert? Moon landing.
People can't give it up.
Yeah.
That silly notion that somehow Kubrick faked it. Kubrick did not fake the moon landing.
Right. Of course. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I'm close to some of these astronauts. I find it reprehensible. I find it's a weird compliment to Stanley Kubrick, by the way. I will say that when it is brought up, because it's just a weird compliment. What do you say about the moon landing, Nathan?
Well, it's the old joke that you've probably heard, but I'll say it anyway. Kubrick was asked to fake the moon landings, and being a perfectionist, he shot it on location.
That is a great one. All right, this is the last word for both of you. When you hear the word Kubrick, what does it connotate to you? Let's go with you first, Robert. I say the word Kubrick. You say what?
Films that I want to see again and again.
Nathan?
An intellectual. He used film to write his ideas. They weren't just visually like arresting, but what intellectuals put in books and articles, he put into his films.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. It's almost as if he was able to capture all of that you would read. Sometimes they say, "Oh, the movie is worse than the book," or the movie doesn't quite capture the book. But then when you watch a Kubrick film, you're like, okay, he's more than done that. If anything, he's created his own masterpiece inside the masterpiece. And so this is the reason why I wanted to bring you both on. I'm very grateful for your time this morning. So the title of the book is Kubrick. It's an Odyssey. So Kubrick, an Odyssey. It's written by Nathan Abrams and Robert Kolker. It's a brilliant exposition of this man's life, but also his filmmaking style. And it was a real honor to have you on Open Book today, guys. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
My next guests are authors that wrote a book about Stanley Kubrick, the film director. But I don't know if you've watched any of his films. Do you remember 2001 Space Odyssey? Did you watch that?
No.
Do you remember Dr. Strangelove about the nuclear bomb?
No, but I watched Dr. Albert Einstein yesterday, the biography of him, and I found it very interesting.
I mean, about the bomb, you're saying, right?
The bomb, yeah. And he was so intelligent, and he was born in Berlin. I thought he was, born in another country, and he was born in Berlin, and it said how many wives he had and how brilliant he was, and he was.
But thank God he came to the United States.
In the world.
Right. Well, thank God he came to the United States. Why these people are so nuts,
Right.
Let the immigrants in, especially the smart immigrants. Let's cut it out. What's your favorite movie, Mom?
My favorite movie, Notebook.
Oh, the love story, huh? You like that one?
Yeah, and she had dementia at the end, and it showed how he took care of her, and I thought that was a beautiful movie.
Okay, so the Nicholas Sparks novel that got turned into a movie, right? And
right.
That's your favorite? What about one of the older movies? Any of the older movies you like?
I'm not too much of a movie goer. I guess, I don't know. I don't know right offhand. No, I don't. Right. I like to watch things. I like to see. I like things about the mind.
You like things about the mind, right? You spend a lot
Yes,
of time reading about the
Van Gogh.
mind, right? Mm-hmm.
Excuse me?
No, I said you like reading about the human mind, right?
Yes, I find the human mind very interesting. I read the whole cover of Van Gogh from cover to cover on how he cut off his ear and how he made the wild horses and the beautiful flowers. He gave us the colors of the flowers. I thought he was brilliant, even though he was bipolar. And I thought that the part of him being bipolar was very interesting on how he did all his major work when he was at that manic depressant type of at a manic state.
Right. All right, Ma. I appreciate.
I like to read.
What did you say? You like to what?
I like to read your books too. So
okay, thank you, Ma.
I didn't get Bitcoin yet.
All right, I'm gonna bring it over, Ma. I'll drop it off for you. Okay.
All right,
love you, Ma.
Love you very much.
All right, see you. All right. Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here that you might like.
If President Biden, who I think had done really good things, was much more forceful and took more risk in the Ukraine, Harris might be president now.
In what way? What would have been more risk? Allow them to use the missiles earlier?
Yeah, I think he could have actually said, President Putin, I'm 82 years old. This is it. We have to stand up for something, and I'm not going to pussyfoot around him. There needs to be risk-taking, especially when you're dealing with dictators and bullies, because that's the language they understand. And I don't think we were forceful enough.
Joining us now on Open Book is Professor Edward Goldberg. He's an NYU professor here in New York City. He's also an author of the book, The United States as Global Liberal Hegemon: How the U.S. Came to Lead the World. It's a fascinating exposition of a lot of different things going on in here. Of course, I love the book for a number of different reasons. Number one, before we started, I talked a little bit about Thomas Hobbes. We'll get into that, but also Dr. Kissinger is somebody that I've always admired. And without Dr. Kissinger, of course, I would have never been introduced to von Metternich and the whole treaty, the Congress of Vienna, which he wrote about in the early part of his career. But let's start with you, sir. Before we start on the book, tell us about your background and your career, if you don't mind. And thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, for sure. I started out actually in international business and international trade finance. And about 14, 15 years ago, I started to write some op-ed pieces, eventually wrote more pieces, wrote my first book, and NYU asked me to join the faculty, and I basically left trade finance to teach international political economy at NYU Center for Global Affairs.
That's a pretty fascinating, but why this book then, sir, and why now?
Okay, good question. I always, what has been in my mind for a long time is why the U.S. is considered the leader of the world and who made it the leader of the world. Actually, the original title of the book, before Paul Gray Macmillan's editors changed it, was Who Anointed America? And who chose us to be the leader of the world and why? And interestingly, when I first started the book, I was kind of not so sure that it was a good thing for America to be the hegemon. Hegemon's the Greek word for leading power. And I thought maybe it's not such a good thing. I mean, I'm a kid of Vietnam. The Vietnam era. And, there were a lot of mistakes and a lot of people got hurt. And I thought, why are we doing this? What's in it for us? As I started to look at the history of it, as I started to look at the benefits of it, the world needs someone to organize it. And the world needs a liberal force, meaning not the current pundit word for liberal that's used all over the place, but the traditional word for liberal, meaning someone who believes in individual freedom and in free markets. The world needs a liberal force to lead it. And there's, frankly, no one else.
Well, when we hear hegemonic, though, sometimes there's a pejorative to that word as well, right? There's the hegemon, when you say global power, it also could potentially mean control, right? And there's a hint of imperialism around
Right.
it, but you don't really mean it that way, right? How do you
No,
mean it?
I mean it with the liberal term in front.
Right,
The
right.
liberal
Okay.
hegemon.
Okay, so the reason why I reference Hobbes, there's a very famous paragraph in the Leviathan. It's interesting because you were mentioning Jonathan Swift as we were getting started, and of course there's John Locke,
Right.
and there's Thomas Hobbes, and so they're all interesting characters. Swift being more of the satirist of the three of them, but what Hobbes said, which has always left an impression on me, is that the world is at its greatest level of peace when there is one global hegemon that uses its military might to put down the internecine tribal conflicts in the world. And then he went on to describe Pax Romana and then, of course, Pax Britannia
Right.
as two examples of this. And so the question I have for you, is America that still today?
Definitely economically. Definitely, I have a chapter in the book about the power of the Federal Reserve. And the power of the Federal Reserve has more or less become the world's fire station for putting out economic fires. It's actually kind of usurped the role of the IMF dealing with major problems. So, yes, economically, and yes, because of the role of the US dollar in reserve currency. It's hard to do it. It's hard to be the liberal hegemon today without allies. And it's not Pax Romana, it's not Pax Great Britain, where they could move around the world and play any game they wanted. We need allies, and allies are a force multiplier. And it's interesting, in today's semi-globalized world or globalized world, whatever you want to call it at the moment, it's the allies who more or less select who the liberal hegemon is going to be. I mean, we don't force France or Germany into the coalition. They in a way chose us, as did Japan, as did Australia, as did the Netherlands, and you can go on and on.
Okay, makes sense. In the book, you write a lot about balance of power, and you write about the need for, I guess, the world when you have a balance of power. It's almost like a form of deterrence, right? You don't have one group that goes to attack the other group if they feel like there's other balancing things on the other side. And obviously, I don't know, just going off of your book, since 1945, we've done a pretty good job of balancing power. Is that fair to say?
Well, we definitely had somewhat of a balance of power with the Soviet Union based on, the MAD concept. Back to
Yep.
John von Neumann's thinking of mutual assured destruction. And that basically worked until the wall fell down. Now, I'm not advocating the wall being built up to have a new balance of power, for sure not. But the MAD policy more or less worked. But the MAD policy was very interesting because it was based on the rationality of your opponent. If your opponent was a true ideologue and didn't care that they would destroy the population, of course, the MAD theory doesn't work.
Okay. Let me ask you this though. In light of what happened with the Ukraine, was there a fault in the system? Is that something that America could be blamed for? Is that something that should not have happened? And if it should not have happened, what could we have done geopolitically to have prevented it from happening?
Well, I think, once again, we have to look at the fact that since 1648, in the end of the 30 Years' War, there's been called the Westphalia Treaties on the idea of sovereignty. One country doesn't invade another country, very simply put. I mean, that's what World War II was about. In 94, I'm sorry, Russia, the Federation of Russia, signed the Budapest Memorandum, guaranteeing the territorial independence of the Ukraine on the concept that Ukraine would give back the nuclear bombs that were stored there during the Soviet Union times. Ukraine gave back the bombs. They signed, the agreement was signed. It was co-assured by the US and the UK. Then Russia invades the Crimea. The world basically did very little. Russia then decides to invade the basic Ukraine. We, in a way, we gave them arms, but we gave them arms with one hand tied behind their back. I mean, I could even theorize that if President Biden, who I think had done really good things, was much more forceful and took more risk in the Ukraine, Harris might be president now.
In what way? What would have been more risk? Allow them to use the missiles earlier?
Yeah, I think he could have actually said, President Putin, I'm 82 years old. This is it. We have to stand up for something, and I'm not going to pussyfoot around him. Now, obviously, he did the prudent thing. I'm not saying he was prudent, but I think there needs to be risk taking, especially when you're dealing with dictators and bullies, because that's the language they understand. And I don't think we were forceful enough.
Okay, but we have been pretty forceful over the years, though, right? I mean, we were forceful in the whole Bosnia-Herzegovina situation. We were forceful.
We were there, but then, and I mentioned this in the book, I think Obama made a huge mistake when he made a red line and didn't live up to it. If you're the liberal hegemon, by definition, in one way or the other, you have to be the cop, as you mentioned before. And if a cop doesn't give out tickets, no one respects a cop. You're going to speed on the New York State Thruway if you never get a ticket.
Yeah, I just find the whole conversation fascinating because we're now shifting. It feels like the Charles Lindberghs and the Huey Longs that were trying this idea of isolationism 80 years ago have won. Now, they've won narrowly. It feels like Donald Trump is saying that, quote unquote, we're in forever wars and we need to retrench and pull back and so forth. And I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think he means that? Do you think that we will maintain our status as what I would describe as being leader of the free world? Or what do you think?
You know the man a little better than I do, okay? But, I hope he's just playing poker. I think he's playing a very dangerous game of poker. I mean, I don't know if you can retreat out of the world anymore. It's not the 1920s. It's not Charles Lindbergh. The economy is now basically globalized. Globalized for the economy, I mean, we're no longer in an industrial economy. Industrial economies are passé. We're a human capital economy. Fixed assets are not as important, how many steel mills you have. What's important is how many Silicon Valleys you have. Once again, human capital. And the Silicon Valleys need to do business all over the world. Google needs to do business all over the world. Facebook needs to do business all over the world. I don't know how you can retract from those markets anymore, as the global economy has changed to be an economy of human capital.
But I mean, yes, and I agree with everything you just said. But I guess there's a broader and perhaps existential point that I'm asking you to respond to. Our grandfathers, and in some cases our great-grandfathers, said, okay, the First World War didn't end so well. We botched the treaty. The League of Nations failed. We asked for too many reparations from the Germans. They responded with this perversity of dictatorship and nationalism, which ended up as National Socialism and ultimately ethnic cleansing and obviously, anti-Semitism. There's feelings like that right now in our society. At least I feel that way. And I'm wondering if there's anybody like our grandparents or the George Marshalls of the world, or Dean Atkinson, the Secretary of State for Truman, the Truman Doctrine, any of these things, that I mean, you write about it brilliantly in the book. The idea is to get us to this status. Are they now being denounced? Are there still enough people in the world, or at least in America, that believe that this is important? Is it important?
Yeah.
Should somebody else take our place, or what do you think?
There's honestly no one else to take our place as a liberal hegemon. Obviously, there's the Chinese or the Russians would like to take our place or share in hegemonic power. But for sure, they're not what we consider our model of liberal capitalism. So is there a voice here in the United States? It has not been expressed correctly. Biden, who did some, I think, very positive things on building allied relationships and strengthening the idea of the hegemon, wasn't able to voice it to the American people. He lacked that leadership skill. Tony Blinken was a great Secretary of State in that respect, was not able to sell it to the American people. So we have a vacuum in terms of leadership there now. It's interesting, I think, and fascinating that our new Secretary of Treasury has been pretty much an internationalist all his life and a globalist.
Yeah.
So he's the one person that stands out in the new administration.
Interesting. I mean, I'm just fascinated with all of this because I feel like, and I don't know how you feel about this, Professor, but I feel like I'm a direct beneficiary of the thought process of these men, mostly men, at the end of the Second World War. They set out the GI Bill. They put in place a system. They put in place a system that led to great prosperity. They created the Marshall Plan, which was counterintuitive, but it fortified those democracies and protected them from Joseph Stalin, which made bigger markets for our goods, which allowed our blue-collar workers to get high wages in the late 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s before the inflation started. And what am I missing? Am I wrong about anything?
I totally agree with you. I'm trying to recall the title of Dean Atkinson's book, There at the Creation.
Present at the creation. Present at the creation.
I mean, you had a group of individuals, Marshall, Atchison. It's an amazing team. George Kennan, part of that team. You can go on. And you had Harry Truman, not a Harvard-educated person, but a very wise and pragmatic person bouncing that team. And it really put together the world that we had. And now we're saying, possibly because of the rapidness of technological change that society is not used to, possibly because that technological change put a part of the system into severe economic injustice, possibly because of the how rapidly culture changes in the United States. For many various reasons, we're saying, hey, let's throw that system out.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'm flabbergasted by it. I am totally flabbergasted by it and don't understand the mood of the country at the moment.
It's almost like we forgot what got us here. That's the thing that I don't understand. And there's it requires leadership, and it feels like there's a lot of adversarial propaganda that's in the system that a lot of people have bought into, where they are, I don't know, they're peeing on the U.S. You know what I mean, which sort of makes it, I don't know. It bothers me. But to your point, I don't see the leadership explaining to the American people the virtues of all of this. And it feels like the American people 80 years ago, after fighting that war, didn't need the explanation. The explanation was prima facie. So what would have to happen to renew this, I guess, is the question.
Sadly, I think to renew it, sadly, is we're going to need a crisis. It's funny. How do you? I've thought a lot about this. How do you unite folks in a democracy? You unite them through crises. I was always surprised with George Bush after 9/11. The weeks after 9/11, he had the whole country that he could have led and didn't do something like a gas and oil tax or something like that when he could have. When in everyone, no one would have been against him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And FDR, of course, was the master of using crises to build coalitions.
Mm-hmm.
So, unfortunately, in a democracy, I think that's what you need, a crisis.
The world faces these new problems, right? We have climate change out there, pandemics, financial challenges, this threat to our political culture that you and I are describing. Let's say I made you the czar. Let's say I said, okay, you're a great student of history. You understand what's worked for us and what hasn't. Given everything that I just said, what would you recommend to the country? Let's say that you were sitting before the new president or a group of leaders in the Senate. What would you recommend?
Ooh, that's a tough one. First, actually, something basic. Civics should be taught again.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no question. Yep.
Basic. Second of all, that we rethink Ronald Reagan's executive order about limiting the fairness doctrine in communication industry.
Okay, so we have a lot of young listeners, sir. So tell us what the fairness doctrine is and how it led to the rise of talk radio and ultimately talk TV on the conservative channels and so forth.
Well, basically, there was what was called a fairness doctrine by the FCC, where basically the networks had to take neutral political stance, more or less. And Ronald Reagan did away with that doctrine. And at the same time, the purpose of the way the doctrine was able to be enforced was because the government, now I'm not a legal expert here, but the government legally controlled the airways.
Mm-hmm.
With cable, the government doesn't control the airways.
Mm-hmm.
So one could say whatever one wants on cable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, although it would be questioned constitutionally, I think we have to go also look at the German constitutional amendment on hate speech. We have to get back to Oliver Wendell Holmes' famous quote about, you can't scream fire in a crowded theater. And that's exactly what's been happening here in political communication for the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Screaming fire in a crowded theater.
I find the book to be very timely because it explains how we got to the position as use your words, a global liberal hegemon, how we became this very prosperous country and by and large benevolent country. Yes, we had some misstarts and failed wars, but they were generally trying to do the right thing, which was to keep the peace, if you will, around the world, suppress communism, suppress terrorism, etc. Not saying it always worked out our way, and not saying that we didn't have some failed missions, but in general, we've tried to do the right thing. And now we're at a crossroads again. So we're at the point in the podcast, so I don't know if you've listened to my podcast, but we put together 5 words and we ask our author to respond to these words, really taken from your book. And so you can give me a 1-word answer or a 1 or 2 sentence answer. If I say the 2 words foreign policy, you say what?
I say how the U.S. should act around the world.
Okay. If I say isolationism, what do you think of?
I would think of walls, whether it's tariff walls, whether it's walls against the world, whether it's walls against migrants. We build, and this is, I think, very important analogy that I've been thinking about. We build Maginot walls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they're false walls.
Yeah. And so just again, for young viewers, what the Maginot Wall or the Maginot Line was, the French built these major fortifications in terms of trying to protect themselves from Germany. But In fact, the new technologies like aircraft and the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, it became very easy for the Germans to go around these walls. And so I think the professor's trying to make the point that the walls, they seem like they could potentially work, but they never really do, right? The Berlin Wall didn't work, frankly,
Right.
and so many other things. So walls typically don't work. If I say the two words United States, you think what?
A dream, a hope, a very unusual experiment, the only multi-ethnic democracy that even tries to work in the world, really something that could be very positive.
Yeah, I mean, or as Lincoln said, right, the last best hope for mankind. It's
Right.
this beautiful thing that we have to try to figure out a way to renew. I mean, one of my problems is that we have 27 amendments, but we haven't really had we had a procedural amendment in 93. Our last big meta amendment was in 1965, so that's 59 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just too long without another amendment. This is a living document. We're not amending it anymore, and it's putting a lot of stress in the system.
Well, think of this: the Senate. Wyoming has 2 senators. California has 2 senators.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Wyoming voter has much more power than the Californian
Yeah,
voter.
no kidding. Makes you want to move to Wyoming, right? Because
Exactly.
you got a lot of muscle in Wyoming. How about if I say the word NATO or the acronym NATO?
Once again, NATO. I think a brilliant policy put together by Truman, Atchison, and Marshall that's kept peace in Western Europe for 75 years.
Okay. What about free world? I say the free world. You say what?
Free world. I think of the free world as a public relations remark by someone in the Eisenhower administration.
Right, but it's stuck, right?
It's stuck.
It's stuck.
Right.
Yeah, pretty interesting, right?
Right.
So, all right. Well, sir, the book is awesome. The title of the book is "The United States as Global Hegemon: How the U.S. Came to Lead the World," and it's written by Edward Goldberg, a professor at NYU. Thank you so much for joining us today on Open Book. Really enjoyed it.
Really enjoyed